Howdy, folks. It's that literary lady again, and thank you again for listening to the 12 Days of Christmas. Today's gift, the second day of Christmas, is going to be Justin Scott Parr. Now, at about 14 years old, Justin Scott Parr ventured with his middle school class to Washington, D.C., where the capital city's monuments, museums, and rich history sparked his desire to explore the world. 18 years later, in June of 2011, Parr embarked on a journey to fulfill a lifelong goal that most people only dream of. After quitting his job with a Fortune 500 company, Mr. Parr grabbed his passport and spent the next 6 months backpacking across 11 Latin American countries. He has chronicled his voyage through photos and a travel blog, and upon returning home, he shared tales of magnificent adventures with his 8-year-old cousin, Destiny. The third grader was enthralled with his vivid stories. Destiny's curiosity about the cultural, historical, and educational aspects of his trip and her countless what-ifs ultimately led to the creation of the popular book series featuring 12-year-old Sage Carrington. As an adventurer at heart, Parr imparts his love of the journey into every Sage Carrington tale, and he currently lives in Harlem, New York. Wow, Justin, welcome to the show.
Yolanda, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure having you here. Now, what sparked my interest of you in the beginning was the Sage Carrington the stories. And if anyone hasn't seen them yet, go to sagecarrington.com. And the covers alone are just so magnificent, and they kind of draw you in. And one of the things that I like is it has children on the cover that look like us. So
Exactly.
Let's first start about talking about your book. Justin, tell us a little bit more about Sage Carrington.
Sure. So Sage Carrington is a 12-year-old girl. She lives in Washington, D.C., and the purpose of the premise of the books are that she and her best friend Isabel Flores, who is also 12 years old, they are best friends, and throughout each of these stories, Sage and Isabel are basically amateur sleuths, very much in the style of Nancy Drew or Hardy Boys or Encyclopedia Brown, that style of storytelling, in which there's some kind of a mystery that occurs within their day-to-day lives, and they go throughout each story exploring their environment, trying to find clues, and ultimately solve the adventure, to solve the mystery.
Okay. Now, do you just have the one book out now, or how many books are in the series?
There are multiple books in the series. One is currently published and available, and the future books are coming. The second book in the series will be released in the winter of 2013. Looks like probably in the February-March timeframe is what it looks like. But the first book, which is called Sage Carrington, 8th Grade Science Sleuth, is available now.
Okay, great. And so I'm assuming that she takes on different adventures in each book, right?
That's correct. Their parents both work for the Smithsonian for a research team with the Smithsonian, which is how Sage and Isabel met about 6 years ago when they were 6 years old. They both met through their parents. But, of course, throughout the years, they've developed a pretty special friendship. They're best friends. They really refer to themselves as sisters because they very much, as you know, young girls, their best friends are very much like their sister. So they have a lot of the same favorite things, and they actually share each other's sneakers. So if you go to the website and look at the photographs or the illustrations, you'll see in many of the pictures that they actually have mismatched shoes.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. In almost every picture, they have on different colors. Okay.
Right. So I wanted to make sure that we captured that sisterhood within the illustration. So just visually ways to show that these two are very, very close. And that plays into the actual plot line of each of the mysteries, the fact that they are so close and that, they value each other, they respect one another, very much wanted to communicate these kinds of principles and ideals.
Okay. And why was it important to you to display children of color?
It's very, very important. I think probably the best way to describe it is just to go into a little bit more depth about how Sage came to be. You mentioned it when you introduced me that my cousin, who then was 8 years old, Destiny, was very, very fascinated. But really, I never intended to write a story. This has all just kind of, I don't want to say it's an accident, but it was never intentional. I actually wanted to just go to the bookstore, local, multinational bookstore chain, and just find a few books off the shelves and bring them home to Destiny and call it a day. And so I went to, at that point, Borders was still in existence. So I went to Borders, I went to Barnes & Noble, And I just assumed I could walk in and I could find a couple of mysteries featuring, young girls who looked like Destiny, who I could just reach to the shelf and bring home an armful of books. Well, I'm sure you know how that story ended, how that shopping trip ended.
Right.
I didn't find anything that was a contemporary kind of, amateur sleuth story featuring young kids of color. And so I kind of had one of those light bulb moments. I was shocked, and to this day I remain shocked that there's just so few titles for our children featuring characters who look like them.
Right.
And particularly this age range, the middle school range is what's called the middle grade or the middle reader books. There are very, very few. There are some chapter books for early readers.
Right.
There are some books for elementary school age kids. Off the top of my head, I can think of Derek Barnes with the Ruby and the Baker Boys, and Whoopi Goldberg has, I believe it's called the Sugar Plum Ballerinas.
Right.
And who else? Kim Wayans has Amy Hodgepodge, but all of these characters are generally in the fourth, fifth grade, somewhere in there. But in terms of junior high school, middle school age, 6th, 7th, 8th grade characters, there's just not much.
Right.
So I recognize that there must be other people who are just as frustrated as me, who have gone to the bookstores, who have gone to Amazon.com, and have literally just walked out frustrated and empty-handed. And so I decided to write the story that not only that I think Destiny would like, but very much the story that I myself would have read as an 8th grade kid, right, or a 7th grade kid. And so that's exactly what I decided to do. So I created these characters and just started to think about where the story could take place. And even though I live in New York, I've always loved Washington, D.C. And as a setting, it's typically a setting for adult political thrillers or espionage kind of stories.
Right.
But I thought it would be fun to take more of a childish look at Washington, D.C., because it's such an amazing place for kids to go in terms of the monuments and the museums and just the natural beauty of it all. And so I figured it would be a really fun canvas to work on and to allow these kids to explore the different museums and monuments and green spaces in the city. And that's exactly what I've done.
Okay, and I'm glad that you've done this. Have you worked to get these books into libraries? Schools and libraries, actually.
Currently working with schools and libraries, yes, that's certainly a goal. This is a very tricky age range to write books for.
Right.
Because we have the buyers are different from the readers. It's a different group, right? The parents, the librarians, and the teachers are the gatekeepers to the readers, who are the children. And so, yes, it's very important to get into middle schools. It's important to talk to teachers, to try and get in front of parents, to go to reading groups or book clubs, all of these things. Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. And I know Destiny was the motivation for Sage Carrington. And I have to ask, you've done such a great job so far with the Sage Carrington books. Are you looking in the future to do a male version of these books?
I've heard that quite a few times already. I absolutely want to make sure that there's something equivalent for our black boys. Absolutely. At this point, yes, go ahead.
No, so you have to admit, because they're, even though that this age group and people of color are underrepresented in the literary world, black males are really, really underrepresented. So that would be a good idea.
I completely agree. And I would hope, it's certainly on my radar, but I'm excited also to see and to hopefully encourage others who are listening to also consider, creating some stories. I think it's important that we don't just have one book or one series featuring one set of characters, but that we, just as, when you go into a bookstore and there's rows and rows and shelves of characters that are white, and they're science fiction based, or they're historical based, or they're fantasy based, or they're mysteries, and the parents that are shopping for these books have literally dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of different characters and storylines to choose from. There's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't also have these options. So It's certainly on my radar, and I would hope that it's on the radar of other people as well, of other authors.
Awesome. That's good to hear. Now, you mentioned, or your bio mentioned, that you loved traveling across Latin America. Is it safe to assume, and I hope I'm not offending you, that you are of African American and Latino descent?
I am black. I'm African American descent.
Okay.
And
okay.
I actually, the reason why, I'm not going to say the reason, one of the reasons why I've given Sage a sidekick, I guess you could say. Her name is Isabel Flores, and Isabel's family is from Mexico.
Okay.
That's her heritage. And I also feel it's very important that our Latino community have some characters as well. If you think that it's tough to find books and literature featuring black characters, try to find some Latino characters.
Right,
it's
that's
even
true.
more difficult. It's even more difficult. And it's a growing demographic, as we just witnessed in the election, right?
Right.
We see that the political power is there, the economic power is there, and there's no reason why there shouldn't be characters reflecting their experiences as well. So I wanted to make sure that we have a nice, diverse representation of characters. And again, Sage's story very much mimics and mirrors my story, my childhood growing up. I had friends from all over the world. It was never a big deal. It was just, I had friends named Gonzalez and Tangkung and Han and
right.
Uzueda, and it was just, they were just my friends. They were just Joey, and they were Tony, and they were Sam, and that's just who they were. It never really occurred to me until I was much older that they came from countries all over the world. So I think it's important that we show our children that it's okay and it's normal, it's fine to have different heritages and different cultures, and to have family members who speak different languages. That's normal, that's healthy. I think it's a very productive way for us to raise our children.
I agree. Where did your love for travel come from? I think you've been all over the place.
My love for travel, I'm 33 years old, and I did not leave the United States until I was 30. It was 3 years ago.
Wow.
And 3 years ago. And just by sheer circumstance, I had the opportunity to travel to Africa. I traveled to Egypt, and I spent about 2 weeks in the Nile Valley of Egypt. And that trip literally changed my life. I've always had a deep interest in the ancient Egyptian civilizations and in the ancient Egyptian history. And I had, seen movies and documentaries and read books and seen all the photographs, and I just kind of thought, well, I've seen it all. I've seen it. I've seen the pictures. I've seen the pages in the magazines. There's really no reason for me to go, right? But I actually, as it turned out, I had an opportunity to go, as I mentioned, for a couple of weeks, and to actually stand on the plateau where the Great Pyramid is, and to see the Valley of the Kings, and to visit the Cairo Museum, and to see the artifacts. And it was just being there, I realized, actually does matter, right? And so that trip changed my entire outlook on, not only on travel, but just the way that the direction that my life has taken since then, with my awareness of certain universal truths and certain historical truths that I have really started to wrap my head around, has really informed a lot of the way that I continue to live my life. And so after that trip, as I mentioned, it was only for 2 weeks, I decided that it needed to be followed up with a much longer journey.
Right.
And so that's when I came back to the United States, and I started saving up for about 1 year. And then I quit my job, and I traveled. I traveled for as long as I could travel, as long as my money would last, my savings would last. And so I bought a one-way flight, and it turns out that I was able to travel for about 6 months. And I backpacked overland, and I was all throughout Mexico and Central America. I went through every country in Central America, all 7, Mexico, Dominican Republic, Colombia, and one more country in the Caribbean. I don't want to say it out loud. I don't know if I should mention. It's a country where we probably aren't supposed to go, just because of
Gotcha.
Yeah, because of some old Cold War kinds of things. But I may or may not have traveled there as well. So.
Okay, we may have or may not have heard you say that. So
I may or may not have, but so yeah, that was a wonderful experience, and I had the opportunity to meet so many incredible people. I learned Spanish, which I had never studied in my life, and got a chance just to really get back to the basics, to step outside of the Western bubble for a while, out of the consumerism and out of just the 24/7 kind of noise that we are pretty much accustomed to. It's kind of the norm.
Right.
But to get outside of it for a period of time and to see what real community looks like and, what contentment looks like and these just basic kind of core human needs, right, when they're met. And so that was quite an adventure. And, again, that also informed a lot of the kind of universal truth and wisdom that I'm trying to introduce into each of the stories that I write.
Now, one of the things I find interesting about you is I can't think of the word right now, so I'm going to use well-rounded in a way that I understand your travels and how your writing may mix in with your traveling, but it's amazing that you use your traveling to the different places that you've been, and then you write a children's book, or I call them tweens, they're in between children and teenagers, and that look like us and look like, brown people basically. But then you go to the other spectrum. I have the pleasure of looking at some of your photography, because you're also a photographer, correct?
That's correct. Mm-hmm. And
you've taken some eclectic, exotic type pictures, and I'm looking at some of the pictures on your website, and some things that normally people would look at and say, okay, why would I take a picture of that? You've taken them in a way that they stand out. Can you tell us a little bit more about your photography?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I that's a very good point that you bring up. I certainly do feel that all of these eclectic experiences certainly contribute to the stories that I write. With regards to photography, I don't consider myself a professional photographer. I don't accept payment for working with anyone. No, I don't. I am just 100% a hobbyist. I'm a very serious hobbyist, but I'm a hobbyist. One thing about me, I'm very particular about maintaining creative control of my projects, and that goes for my books and for my photography and anything else that I do. And I just find that whenever someone can contract you and pay you for something, that they then, I'm not saying they totally control it, but they have a good amount of influence in terms of what you should or shouldn't do or can or cannot do. So I typically work with, I enjoy working with artists themselves. So I work with a lot of dancers and actors and other performance artists when I'm doing portrait work. And then, as you mentioned, I also, whenever I'm traveling, I'll, grab the camera and do some environmental work or landscape photography and that kind of thing. But I think just from an artistic point of view, I think the photography helps me especially when I'm communicating with my illustrator in terms of trying to capture the essence of a pose that I want the characters to have in the illustration, or even something like the background of the scene or the scene itself, where the character should be in the space within the scene. So it certainly all feeds into it. I would absolutely agree with that.
Okay. And going back to Sage Carrington, I have to give a shout-out, if you so care to do so, to your illustrator, because whoever your illustrator is for the books did a darn good job, and there are some people like myself who are out there looking for illustrators for their books, their children's books, or whatever the case may be. Do you mind giving a shout-out to who that person is? Maybe that person can get more clients?
Absolutely. I have no problem with that. And the illustrator, I completely agree with you. The full credit is on the book cover. So if anyone goes to Amazon.com, or I can put it on my website or on SageCarrington.com, his name is Igor. I don't want to mess up his last name. I would just say go to the Amazon.com page for SageCarrington.com, and you can look at the book's cover, the full cover, and the interior, the first copyright page. I list all credits.
Okay.
My editor, my illustrator, my book designer, my interior designer. I have no problem giving credit where credit is due. I don't want to, keep anyone's work secret so that I can just kind of monopolize it.
Yeah.
Anyone who wants to get in touch with Igor, I would say either you can contact me directly or you can go to the Amazon page and just look at the copyright. I think it's page number 2 within the book. You can look at it for free through Amazon.com, and you can find Igor's name. I don't want to butcher his last name. Igor is actually, he lives in Europe, Eastern Europe. I believe he lives in Russia. And I was fortunate enough to find him. I completely agree. Yeah, I can't tell you, Yolanda, how much positive feedback I've received from the illustration. And while we're on this point, I'm very deliberate in making sure that I had something visual. I think particularly for this age range, when we're talking about children's literature, kids need to have something visual.
Right.
They love characters. And it's important that the characters act and speak and think in really engaging and fun ways, but they also have to have a unique visual look to them.
Yes.
And I think it's very, very important that we as authors also consider the full spectrum. Even though it is a book, the novel itself does not have illustration. I want to point that out. The novel itself is a traditional chapter book. But having said that, we are developing, and it will be available by the time this airs. I think it will be available. Actually, I'm certain it will be, because it will be available early December.
Okay.
There's an 8x10 booklet, a supplemental booklet. It looks like it's going to be about 54 pages, and it's a full-color 8x10 booklet that will feature some of the illustrations, some of Igor's illustrations, so that kids can not only have the novel, which is a typical, it's like a 5x8-inch book, typical novel, but they can also then pick up the 8x10 full-color booklet, which then will present the large-size full-color illustrations of Sage and Isabel. And it's going to be a combination of just full-color, full-page illustration, along with some blank journal-style pages where kids can write in their kinds of thoughts and respond to different journal entries that Sage and Isabel have written within the book. So that's coming in the next couple of weeks, I'd say by early December.
That's awesome. I can't wait for that. And for those of you who are listening, I encourage you, whether you're white, black, Hispanic, Chinese, whatever, I would encourage you to go out and buy these books. Now, keep in mind, and I hope I don't step on anybody's toes, but if I do, hey, we as African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, we buy Caucasian books all the time. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, now that these books are coming out about Asians, Hispanic, and African Americans, we want you to buy our books too, because like it or not, we all live together, we all have an experience, and we all have to embrace that. So I don't just encourage my African American listeners to go out and buy these books, because if you are a white or Caucasian person who is trying to teach your child harmony and debunk racism, it's good that they have this information as well, so they'll see what it looks like. And these Sage Carrington books, again, are a good example. They're colorful, they're vivid, they're bright, they're very pleasing to the eye. So, again, I encourage you to go out and buy these books. You can get them on Amazon.com, and you can also go to SageCarrington.com. Sage has her own email list and exploratory website and so on. Go on, check out the website. It's a very nice website, and I will be getting these books I have 3 grandchildren, so I'll be getting these books for my grandchildren. So go out and support. And, Justin, before we go, can you tell our audience how they can reach you?
Sure. So you can reach me through the SageCarrington.com website. There's a contact form that comes directly to me.
Okay.
You can reach me on Facebook, and you can reach me, and my full name is Justin Scott Parr. You can find me on Facebook, and through my blog, which it's currently it's JustScott, JUSCOTT, but we're about to shift it all over to JustinScottParr.com. So I would say by the time this airs, it will be JustinScottParr.com. So okay. Either one.
Okay, that's awesome, Justin. Thank you for writing the Sage Character series, and thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Again, it's my pleasure. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you. And thank you, folks, for listening to the 12 Days of Christmas. Your second day gift is Justin Scott Parr. Please support him. And tomorrow we'll have your third day of Christmas gift. Thank you and have a great day.